thank you for joining us today from North Carolina.
My pleasure. It's good to be here.
So again, one of the areas that really captured my imagination based on feedback around your nomination was you tried very much, Magnus, as a powerhouse, an inclusive leader who's created a culture of safety, a culture of trust, and a culture of transparency, and being an autistic and neurodiverse leader yourself. So why don't we start by you telling us about you and your story?
Sure, James. So like many neurodivergent people, I didn't have the straight and narrow path to a successful career that most people follow. I had to carve out my own path. I did not do well in public school, and because of home circumstances, university was not an option for me. So I had to carve my way into tech, into a career in tech through unconventional means, come in through the back door, as it were, and work my way up. The benefit was no student loans. Here in the States, that's a big deal. And the downside is it took a little longer to get where I'm at. But I'm hoping through my experience and my example that we can make it easier for others who may have some things in common with me to find their way.
Absolutely. And now you're in a very senior technology leadership role in engineering, in a hugely disruptive sector where there's constant change and evolution.
That's right. I started out as an engineer, hands-on, building things by myself, and it was through my disruptive example that I was recruited by my chief technology officer into my first management role, and he mentored me, and I found I enjoyed and was much better at management than I ever was at engineering. So that went very far, and I don't think I'm out of runway yet. So I currently manage a global team of several hundred people across a number of engineering disciplines, and I'm really enjoying the opportunity to help so many people to find their place in their careers, to get re-engaged, to find success for themselves.
And that, again, will be hugely inspiring, Magnus, for some of the autistic communities out there, looking at their careers and what opportunities they can develop in the future. What do you think has been the secret around you being described as that inclusive leader and as that powerhouse around safety, trust, and transparency within your teams?
Well, I think part of it was figuring out how to take the biological imperative of autistic candor. That is to say, as an autistic person, I feel like I have to speak the truth all the time. And I have a very highly developed sense of right and wrong. Early in my career, it was very difficult to share those attributes with coworkers without coming on too strong. So it took a lot of time, a lot of mentoring to figure out how do I continue to be authentic and at the same time use these natural attributes of being autistic as a strength. And I'm happy to say, when I show up in senior leadership meetings today, it's very common for vice presidents in the room to say things to me like, I'm looking forward to the Magnus truth bomb, because I'm always that person in the room that can speak truth to power, but in a way that they can actually consume it.
And these meetings should result in action items. Like, you're not just coming in to complain about something and walk away, phew, I got that off my chest, I feel better now. No, I found something that is not going so well. What can we do within this team to get better at this?
So if we go back a few weeks, tell us, how did it feel when you were nominated for a number, but specifically the Stereotype Buster Award?
I have to tell you, it was emotionally overwhelming. I don't try to put myself out there very much. I don't have a social media strategy of any kind. I'm not trying to gain followers or anything like that. And in fact, most of my work happens behind the scenes. I very much enjoy just being in the background, helping to use my position to elevate other people who often don't have access. So to be nominated among some of those very fine people, it was an emotional experience, and I feel just absolutely fantastic to even be considered.
Well, as a leader of many people, it's a very reserved nomination. So congratulations on that, Magnus.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
So tell us, from your experience, and from being at a point where you're being described as this inclusive leader, what were some of the drivers of that? And in that context, have you experienced stereotyping against yourself in the workplace?
I've absolutely experienced stereotyping, and I continue to. So I think there's some conception that I've made it, and because I'm the senior leader, that somehow I'm free of all of the kinds of things that autistic employees have to deal with. And the fact is, even to this day, it's still something I have to work very hard with people above me, with human resources, to try to help them to understand sometimes some of the things that are seen as unusual behaviors are natural behaviors for people from the neurodivergent community. I'm not just autistic either. I'm also ADHD.
Okay.
So the idea that I could get up in the middle of a meeting and just start walking around and feeding my fish, the people around me might think that I'm not paying attention, when in reality, this is how I focus better on the conversations. There's a misconception, a stereotype, if you will, that autistic people lack empathy, when in fact, so many of us have a sort of hyper empathy. And it doesn't manifest quite the same in us, so it may look as if we're not empathetic. But in everything that I do, I can't help but think about the potential impact of my decisions on people who aren't like me. Mm. And when people who aren't like me are speaking, I want to make room for them. When they're not speaking, I want to reach out to them and understand, hey, what are you thinking? What's not being said? And have them help me to have a rounder worldview in the decisions that I make.
And can I ask, when you have experienced stereotyping, what sort of coping strategies have you put in place to help you at those times?
This is going to be very unusual advice I'm going to give, but I give this advice to people who report to me. I tell them, go out and interview periodically for jobs, even if you're very happy with me, especially if you're very happy with me. Because I want you to feel that sense of safety, that if you ever feel like this isn't right, you have value. You have inherent value. So I have two basic rules that I try to follow when things aren't clear. Number one, I try to build up the kind of talent that everybody wants to poach from me. And then number two, I try to cultivate the working environment that they never want to leave. So I follow my own advice. I go out and interview from time to time, and I get offers frequently for more senior roles, for more money. And it's very, very empowering to go back to work if I'm feeling frustrated, if I'm feeling like I'm being discriminated against, and just know if it was ever really that bad, I have mobility, I can move.
You
But
have choice.
the harder thing to do is to stay put and fix the broken system so that it's less broken for the next person who has to deal with it.
What advice would you give companies when hiring and working with neurodiverse talent?
There is so much. I think it can begin with the talent pipeline and how you're recruiting. And this can broadly apply to almost any marginalized community, right? Find out the places where folks in this community feel strong. Go to neurodiversity conferences, and not the ones that are necessarily hosted by non-neurodivergent people for non-neurodivergent people to talk about neurodivergent people. I'm talking about the ones that are hosted by neurodivergent people. We have a saying in the disability community around nothing about us without us. And so much of what happens in neurodiversity space happens without neurodivergent voices leading the way. So if you go to the places where neurodivergent people are leading and gathering together, and it may not look like what you're used to for other candidates. It may require, like getting a Twitter account or getting an Instagram account, following hashtags like actually autistic, and finding people from unconventional sources. So it can begin there. When you create your job descriptions, it would help to have autistic reviewers, other neurodivergent reviewers of those job descriptions to understand, is there any kind of unintentional, unconscious bias that's filtering folks out? I know as a neurodivergent person, if I'm reading a job description, I check 90% of the boxes, but 10% of them look a little different than my experience. I start wondering, well, maybe this isn't the job for me because I'm not qualified. So it really requires thinking more critically about what are the true hard requirements, the things you can't live without, versus what are the things you just merely prefer. When a person's interviewing, having a sense of, are we hiring somebody that interviews well, or are we hiring somebody that can do the job well? Are we hiring for a culture fit, or are we hiring for somebody that can add to our culture, expand our culture and our thinking? When somebody's in the job, making sure that you share a common understanding of what the role is. How is that person doing in their job all the time? Where is that person going on their career path? Where are we going together as a team? And I think this works for anybody, not just the neurodivergent population, but the neurodivergent population needs it. To ask them, what do you need from us to do your life's best work here? And if it's reasonable, offer it to them. It shouldn't require a doctor's note.
So have you got any examples you'd like to share around how you've worked with neurodiverse talent to maximize their potential?
Sure. In my case, most of the folks that I work with only disclose to me personally, only because I'm out there about being neurodivergent.
Yes.
The people who work for me or around me will come to me and tell me, I'm telling you because I know you're one of us, but please don't tell human resources. Please don't tell anybody else. And they're everywhere at all levels of the organization. That's really important to know. If you're thinking about recruiting neurodivergent talent, first be thinking about the ones you already have that don't feel safe telling you that they are there. I can tell you that it's very common for me to hear folks telling me, hey, before we have a meeting, would you mind putting an agenda, some of the things we're going to talk about, and maybe send on pre-reading material if we're going to look at a spreadsheet together, or work on a document together. Can you please send that ahead of time so I can think about it first and come up with some talking points? The talking points issue is a very common one. Folks wanting to have some time to think about what they're going to say before they say it.
How can you help other neurodiverse individuals in the world of work? What would be your top tips?
So I think if you are neurodivergent and you feel safe being out, it is very empowering to the people who don't feel safe being out to know that they are not alone. If you're not neurodivergent, I think it's important to know when you're trying to help people in this community, make sure you're going to authentic sources. It's a very common error, I think, for companies to go to parents, neurotypical parents of neurodivergent children for advice. And I would feel much better seeing organizations going to neurodivergent adults for advice on how to work with other neurodivergent adults. I think, too, don't assume what we need. Ask. And have some faith that there's truth in what you're hearing, even if it's unexpected or sounds unusual. For me, remote work is a must. And it's not something I do so that I can goof off. It's something I do so I can focus. If I want to work in the dark so that I can manage my sensory overwhelm, that's an accessibility issue for me. If I want to have a desk cluttered with animals, I've got aquariums all around me. I have on my desk an enclosure filled with little tiny crabs. And I have all kinds of fidget toys all around me. And people can't see my hands when I'm working. I want to be able to do those things. I want to be able to have conversations while I'm busying my senses with these things all around me, and I can't do that safely in an office space. Even if I could bring them into an office space, I would feel very self-conscious about behaving in a very authentic neurodivergent way. So when I ask for remote work, it's not goofing off. It's so that I can be my most highly performant. That is to say, when you're working with neurodivergent talent, have some trust that they know what they need to be successful. Listen to them. Don't expect them to come to you. Go to them and ask periodically, hey, are we supporting your needs? Do you have what you need to do your best work here? And listen with a sense of intellectual curiosity.
Magnus, thank you so much for telling us your story. I certainly think you should trademark the Magnus Truth Bomb. That's a huge change for good, Adrian. I'm sure it has been for you in the past, and I'm sure it will be for you in the future. So thank you for talking to us today.